is David Lichtenstein, and welcome to the Yeshiva Shalmaila, and it is the Yeshiva Shalmaila. Last month we hit our 2 millionth download. That's between the website, our app, as well as the phone. That's almost as many as Yotzei Mitzrayim. So we're very proud of that. So this week's topic, very interesting, in the news, credit cards, miles and points, buying, selling them, using them. Is it permissible al pi halacha? Is it a good way to supplement your income? Is it a good way to travel and get a good deal? Or are there shilos of gzela? Maybe chil Hashem if there's gzela. Ribbis. And on a social level, do many of the people who give their credit cards out to be for others to use and in return receive miles, do they understand the risk profile of what they're accepting, what they're undertaking? And this has been in the news lately. There have been a number of people, businesses, individuals, etc., who, were poishet regel, they went mechola, they went bankrupt, and they didn't repay those who who had lent them their cards to rack up points and miles. So this is a social level. We have a wonderful host of guests. We have Dan Eleff. He is the famous Dan of Dan's Deals. He gets millions of hits a month. He's like maybe the number one site on the internet for bargains. We have Rabbi Shmuel Honigwachs of the Bais HaVaad. He's a Dayan, very erudite Dayan. We have Rabbi Moshe Royde. He was from the Ribbis Kollel by Rabbi Eliyahu Levine, an expert in Ribbis. So it should be a very fascinating, both a halachic as well as a social conversation. Next week, we're going to have an interesting topic. What should women be learning? We spoke about what should men be learning after leaving yeshiva. What should women be learning? And you're saying, should women be learning anything? And the response is, well, how does a woman stay inspired? It's a big Freie world out there. And women today, they're very educated, they're intelligent, and they need inspiration just like everybody else. Should they be learning? What should they be learning? Very interesting group of speakers. And I will add on, we will speak one more topic that's been in the news lately we will discuss, and that is, should women get educated? In Eretz Yisrael, there have been a number of Rabbanim who've come out very strongly about women getting any type of education. So it's some type of a paradox. On one hand, we expect them to help support the family. On the other hand, they're saying they shouldn't get educated. So is this a conundrum that has a solution or not? That's next week's topic. But before we go to our guests, I do want to say something about the Megillah. It's called Megillas Esther. She's the heroine of the Megillah. But here's what's interesting. Even though the Megillah is named after her, she doesn't show up until the second parak. And really until much later in the Megillah, the fourth or fifth parak, she really seems like very passive, almost like a potted plant. Like, just think of it. Mordechai is introduced. Ish Yehudi, Haya B'Shushan Abir. It's the first time somebody's called Ish Yehudi. What a compliment. Ben Yoyer, his father's name. Ben Shimi, his grandfather's name. Ben Kish, his elder Zayda, all the way back to Binyamin. Wow, what a title. Esther, I don't know. She's like this orphan that he adopted. Ki ein lo aveim. She's like destitute. Chazal say, not only was she an orphan, but she was an extreme orphan. It says, when her mother was expecting her, her father died. After her mother gave birth, her mother died. Ein la aveim. She was like an orphan squared. And then look at how she appears in the Megillah. She's entirely passive. It says, Vatilokech Esther Beis HaMelech. She was just taken. Like, here's this Beis Yaakov girl, comes from Gedolei Olam. She was an Einikel of Shaul HaMelech, the niece of Mordechai, the Gadol Hador, and she didn't complain. She didn't try to hide. She was just taken. She was moitzachein b'einei of all the people who saw her. She didn't put up a fuss. She didn't say, hey, what am I doing here? You can't do this to me. Like, I'm a Beis Yaakov girl. Why am I in the harem? Nothing. And what else? Ein Esther Magedes. Everything's hidden. Everything's quiet. Why? Again, because Mordechai told her, like, can't you make up your mind for yourself? It is good for you. It isn't good for you. She just comes across almost like a potted plant. And what does the name Esther really mean? Right? Where's the first time you have the word Esther in the Torah? Well, you have by Cain, it says, Miponecha esoser, I will hide from you. What does the word hiding usually mean? Well, the Gemara says, Vanoichi haster aster. The word Esther, the Gemara says, comes from hiding. What do you say? The Yoshev baseiser v'nach beisa. Right? You will sit in the darkness in the darkness and hide. You will hide in the darkness. People don't hide if they have, a sense of of courage, of the ability to commit, to close, to produce, to make a difference. That's not when you're hiding. Hiding comes, B'tzel kenofecha tastireni, we say, what does that mean? Shelter me. I need shelter. It's a dangerous world out there. So Esther is very much hidden. She's hiding. She's frightful. All the way. Not only is she seem like very, passive and scared. When Big Son and Sarah, she says, Mordechai told her to do it. She did in the name of Mordechai. Doesn't say anything about herself. And what happens? She seemed also very naive. What happens? It says Mordechai comes out b'shara ir, the ir Shushan Navoicha, after the Gzeira of Haman and Achashverosh to kill all the Eden. What does it say? He comes out b'kroi begadim, and he sends to her. He says, "Don't you know what the Melech was and Haman were geyser?" She doesn't know anything. It's like living in the White House and not knowing that the president is in legal trouble, or that there's a war in Iraq and Iran. I mean, it's just not just sheltered and passive and sort of scared, but also very naive, right? This is the Esther, Lashon Seiser, I'm scared, I'm hiding. But then what happens? Something amazing. Mordechai tells her, you know what? Miyadat in Mo'ez Kazois he got la Malchus. You know what, Esther? You're an Adela, scared, worried, terrified of the world, but you may have a mission. There's a mission here. Miyodat and Mo'ez Kazois he Malchus. And what happens to Esther? Something amazing. A metamorphosis. She suddenly tells Mordechai, she says, you know what, go fast to me. Tsumi alai. She gives instructions. And afterwards, when she comes to the Bais HaMelech, to the Suda, what does Rashi say? Mordechai originally wanted her to just go in and tell the king, he wants to kill us. But she was a woman. She had Bina Yisera. She knew, if I just come into the Melech and just straight out, it's a disagreement between me and Haman, maybe he'll go with the vice chancellor. It doesn't seem that Achashverosh had a lot of respect for women. He was clearly misogynistic, right? He beheaded his last wife. So Rashi says she becomes very clever. She plants an idea in Achashverosh's mind. She starts plotting, all on her own, without Mordechai. A melech v'Haman. And what's she saying? Rashi says, let the melech get a little bit, get jealous. There's another guy who's interested in your wife. Haman, Esther, Medrash says, the Megillah says was beautiful. And the seed starts planting and germinating and flourishing. The next thing, Haman comes in, and what does the Melech Achashverosh to him? Take him to Mordechai, take him to the streets, etc. So it's germinating. And the next night, what does she do? She gives attention to Haman. Achashverosh gets mad. Haman falls on the Mita, bingo. What do we see again? She pleads with the king to save the Jews. Then she pleads for a second day without Haman, without Achashverosh, and then the next time says she's the one who places Mordechai al Beis Haman. So she empowers Mordechai. So just think of it: this totally shy, hidden person, afraid to express themselves, afraid to roar. She had a lion in her heart, but she was afraid. And what happens? It just changes. And when does it change? It changes. She goes from karka olam, right? She goes from somebody totally hidden, passive, right? The Gemara calls her karka olam. She becomes a lion. And when is it? When she finds her mission. And what do Chazal say? All tzaddikim are nikra hadasim after Esther. And here's how I understand it. Most of us, we come into a world. It's a scary world. Everybody you meet when you're growing up already has their homes, their jobs. Everybody has their turf. Every child, everybody growing up is the newcomer. It's a big world. Everybody's right. Who am I? And you could stay Esther. You could stay hidden. You could stay Assur. I will hide. I will be right. I will be fearful. Or you could roar. And when does that change? When you find a mission. So the Medrash says, all tzaddikim, you know what separates them? They find their mission. And here's an amazing Zohar HaKadosh. The Zohar HaKadosh says Esther means two things. It says Assur, I will hide. But it also means Miloshin binyan ustira. I will break out. I will rule. I will break. I will dominate. Esther. And there are two Esthers in the Megillah. There's the shy, fearful, hidden, and there's the Esther Miloshin binyan ustira. She just, everything in her heart comes roaring out. And what is it? When she finds her mission. So what's the message of the Megillah of Esther? If we want to take the message of Esther and live that message, we have to spend time finding our mission. Everybody has a mission. The guy in Mishlei says every single person has a mission. You used to go to a Navi to find, he would tell you what your mission is. He says now we have to search to find our mission. But when we find a mission, something we love and we believe in, whatever it may be, that's when we will go from hiding to roaring. We will come from Assur to the Esther of binyan ustira. That is, to me, the message of Esther in the Megillah. Before we go to our guests, let me ask the riddle of the week. So the Shulchan Aruch in Taf Reish Ayin Hey Gimel says, Yesh Misha Aimer, that a katan could be madlik ner Chanukah, right? And he could be mitzi an ish, right? The katan, there is such a man diyamar. So the question is that the Shulchan Aruch in Taf Reish Peites Bais, right, says that a katan cannot be mitzi a gadol b'Megillah. And what's the reason? Because Megillah is a drabanan, right? But a katan has two drabanans. He also has the mitzvah of chinuch. So two drabanans cannot be mitzi somebody who just has one chiyuv drabanan. So the question is, by Chanukah, which is also a drabanan, we say we have somebody who believes that yesh mishaymer, that a katan could be mitzi. A gadol b'ner Chanukah, why doesn't that same yesh mishaymer say that a katan should be able to be mitzi a gadol with Megillah? Or if you want to look at the flip side of it, if he can't be mitzi and Megillah, because trei drabanan can't be mitzi chad drabanan, so then why by Chanukah can he be mitzi? That is the riddle of the week. Now let's go to our wonderful guest. We have on the phone with us from Cleveland, Dayan Eleff, who runs Dayan's Deals, which gets several million hits a month. It is, I think, certainly in the from a world, the number one website if you're looking for a mitzvah. And I still remember growing up, my grandmother used to tell me, she said, she was an old Polish Yerushalayim Yidden, she said, but she spoke English. She said, when I was a little boy, she said, David, do you know what OGBR stands for? So I said, no. She said, OGBR stands for Only Goyim Buy Retail. So Dan's Deal certainly agrees with her. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Dan, tell us a little bit about, it's been in the news lately, the credit card. People are, getting their credit card swiped for points, etc., and people are losing money. Give us, from an insider, some insight into what the program is, what the mistakes are, and whether it's honest, dishonest. Give us some inside thought.
Sure. Just some background information. American Airlines launched the first frequent flyer mileage program in 1981. United launched theirs a week later. And they did it to reward their frequent flyers. I don't think they realized quite how successful they would become. Today, the entire profit margin of those airlines is only due to selling their miles. And they sell them to partners such as banks. Those banks, such as Chase, American Express, they realize that miles are a great way to incentivize people to sign up for credit cards and use their credit cards. For the past 15 years on Dan's Deals, I've talked about how to rack up those miles and use them for first-class tickets around the world, or to use them for cash back if that's what you want to go for. But I've always warned people that it's a dangerous game. They need to realize that if you're going to treat your credit card as anything other than cash, you're going to fall into a cycle of debt. You're going to wind up paying big interest fees. And people that are paying those interest fees are subsidizing other people who earn these miles and are flying around the world. They're subsidizing those people. So the key is never to open a credit card in the first place if you can't control it, if you can't pay your bills on time, and if you can't treat it as anything other than cash, because that's what it is. This is just cash. It's not a number on your screen. This is your actual money. So I've always warned that when I gave over a dozen seminars, and my first thing that I talk about is those warnings. What's going on now, people are opening up businesses. They can't access capital that they need. So they're turning to their friends, they're turning to their neighbors, and they're asking for a favor. They're saying, can you give my business some capital? Can you loan me money? I'll swipe your credit card, and you'll earn you'll earn the miles, or if you have a cashback card, you'll earn cash back on this transaction, and I'll be able to access your line of credit, and I'll be able to fund my businesses this way. And I'll pay you back before the bill is due so that you don't owe any interest fees. So if somebody is not educated, doesn't have the financial background to understand the risks here, they think this is a nose-lose situation. They'll make millions of miles loaning their credit card lines to somebody else. But they need to realize that this is a high-risk transaction. You need to, before you loan someone hundreds of thousands of dollars, you need to do due diligence. You need to have a collateral for the loan. You need to protect yourself. And I think what's going on is that people are loaning vast sums of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, to businesses without doing any of that, without having any protection. And that's fine as long as the business does well. But once the business starts failing, that creates the problem where you now owe hundreds of thousands of dollars to a bank, and you don't have the funds to pay that back. And you start having to pay interest, and you start wondering, what am I going to do? Now, some people think that it's a credit card. I could just dispute the transaction and not pay for it. But if you authorize someone to use your credit card, what exactly are you disputing here? You could dispute that something was unauthorized, but if it is authorized, you're lying about that. There's not really much that you can do to dispute this transaction. Now, I spoke with Zev Brenner this past month of Shabbos. He had a panel of guests on, including myself and Aaron Torsky. Aaron is representing one of these stores in Crown Heights, which is involved in this swiping scheme, where he started off innocently. He started off years ago where he was just swiping people's credit cards and paying them back on time. Things start to snowball. He opened up several other business ventures, became riskier, and he has to get more and more people swiping their credit cards in order to pay it off. And in 1 month, he didn't have the funds to pay off those credit cards on time, and everybody's left with that hot potato. People are realizing, I have to pay back all this money now. I don't have that kind of money. I've spoken to people involved in this, $400,000, $500,000 in debt, and they can't afford to pay that back. So this is a tragedy. Aaron mentioned that $50 million is what he's personally involved with. That's just what he's involved with, as opposed to everything that's going on. But this, at least $50 million of debt from people who have swiped their credit cards without doing the proper due diligence, and it's nothing short of a tragedy, and it's really hard to imagine. Now, Aaron was calling them investors in this scheme, and I don't think they were investors. They weren't there to make a profit on an investment. They are lenders. They're victims, and they're people who need better education and better tools, and financial literacy classes are something that need to be spoken about. But they need to understand what kind of people need to understand. What I'm here to try to explain to everybody is that this is cash. If you wouldn't hand over a suitcase full of cash, don't give someone your credit card. And now there's other advertisements in the community, people that are offering $5,000, $10,000 for your Social Security number. Your Social Security number, this is your entire life. This is the keys to your life, to your financial future.
What do they want to do? What do they want to do with the Social Security number?
So they want to open up credit cards. All they say is they're going to open up credit cards, and they'll use the points, and they'll sell the points for you, and they'll give you $5,000 for your Social Security number. And people are doing that because, hey, it's hard to live as a firm Jew in 2019. It is expensive, and I understand that. And $5,000, $10,000 can really help pay the bills. But what they're not realizing is that not all of these companies have your best intentions at heart. They are what you open up credit cards in your name, they're swiping those cards, they're giving them to businesses, and if the businesses pay them back, that's great, but it doesn't always get paid back. I've spoken to people who have made $5,000, Dan,
if it's $50 million, I know at least $50 million that hasn't been paid back.
Of course.
But let me ask you a few questions.
People are winding up in these cases with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, all for gaining $5,000. So,
and it's fair to say
people
will lose their homes because of this. Is that fair to say? I mean, this is personal debt. Even if they went into bankruptcy, it's very likely they'll lose their homes in bankruptcy. Right? It's an unsecured claim.
It's nothing short of a tragedy. It's completely
so people will lose their. If in Florida they wouldn't lose their home, but outside of Florida you'll lose the home. So let me ask you a few questions with legal and halacha. And I know you're not a Dayan and you're not a lawyer, but I want to run some thoughts by you. Is there any question of Ribbis when you do this?
Absolutely. So if somebody has, as far as earning the credit card miles, my understanding is that's not a problem because it's from a third party. So the fact that someone is earning credit card miles on this loan is not an issue of Ribbis.
Well, if I make a deal, I'll lend you money. I'll lend Ruvain money if Shimon pays me Ribbis. That's very problematic.
The fact that it is problematic, I have asked my own Rav and people have, and they said that's not really the issue because it has nothing to do with the transaction. It's completely just tangential to the transaction. The fact that the bank gives a reward on that.
Why? Wait! It's contractual. Why is that?
It's not contractual. The fact that
when you sign on the credit card, it says every dollar you spend, you're going to get a mile. That's correct. As contractual as it gets. That's
sure. But that's between you and the bank. The fact that Reuven is loaning Shimon $100,000.
Right.
And that he'll get rewarded from somebody else is not part of that contract. That's not part of the contract of loaning the $100,000. There's no the fact that you're earning miles. What if you're using a credit card that's not earning miles? What if you're using a credit card that earns cash? I mean, there's all different factors in that, but that in itself is not Ribbis, from what my Rav told me and from what others have asked as well. The real problem with Ribbis comes in is when that money is not paid back, and then the bank starts charging interest. Now, some people might still intend to pay you back, they just have short-term cash crunch. But now they can't pay back that interest that you owe on your credit card. So if you have $500,000 in outstanding debt and you don't pay that bill and your interest rate is going to be thousands of dollars, even if this person was to pay you back, they're not allowed to pay you back that interest rate the bank is charging you because that would be Ribbis.
Now, what about, is it legal to sell the points and to use somebody else's credit card? Are there legalities around this? And when I say illegal, I don't mean as far as criminal. I mean contractual. Do the credit card company say, listen, you can't sell points, you cannot buy and sell points, and that goes against the agreement here? This is so out of my pay scale. Is it?
So there's a few factors here. First of all, not everybody's using credit cards that earn miles. They could be using credit cards that earn cash back, in which case there's no problem because it is cash. As for credit cards that are earning miles, yes, it is against the terms of every credit card program and every airline program to sell the miles. I don't advocate selling miles. I think people should use them on trips where they couldn't otherwise afford to use them. People have told me how dance deals have saved their marriage because they needed to travel places, they couldn't afford it, and all of a sudden they realize this whole world is out there where they can afford to travel, they can go to Eretz Yisrael, people have emailed me they found shidduchim when they've traveled based on their miles. So I think it's wonderful that people can travel with the miles. As far as selling miles, yes, it is against the terms of every program. They can shut you down. Airlines and banks do shut you down for selling their miles if you're caught selling them. So yes, it's definitely against the contract of every program. It's not illegal. You're not going to jail, but you could lose your points.
So my question to you is, Dan, the Rabbanim who you've spoken to, have they said that it's gzela from the banks because you're taking mileage which has a real value, the trip has a value, and so we hold Shulchan Aruch holds gezel akum is Assur. It's also shaylav genevas das akum. Have the Rabbanim opined on that?
I haven't personally asked. Like I said, I always write not to sell your miles because it's simply not worth the risk. Besides for whether it's Gazela, whether it's Genevas Das, it's not worth losing your entire American Advantage account, your United account. It's not worth getting shut down by Chase Bank.
But I would just add on to that most from the people I know spend double. A piece of meat costs us double or sometimes triple.
Sure.
Our schools cost us infinite amount more because many of them, you go to public school, there's no cost of schooling.
Free.
So we spend a fortune, right, to keep the Taryag mitzvahs. So I would just opine that the fact that it's Gezel should be of far greater importance than the fact that maybe you're getting a good deal on the miles.
If you're looking to sell the miles, you're better off with a credit card that earns 2% cash back, and you don't need to deal with selling miles. The whole advantage of miles is that they can be worth more than 2%. However, if you're like you're saying, it's not worth Zela, and it's not worth Gnevas Das, and it's not worth the risk of being shut down.
But there would be, if you gave somebody else your credit card to swipe, and they used it and they paid you back, there would be nothing in the contract with your bank against that, would there?
There's nothing per se against that. It's a simple loan. The problem is that people don't realize that it's a stupid loan. They're not realizing that your neighbor might look like an honest guy. And the truth is, for some of these cases, it is an honest person. But if you're not going to do the due diligence and you're not going to ask for a collateral, physical collateral that you can collect on if you're not getting paid back on, this is the stupid unsecured debt, and it's just foolishness. And I really think that yeshivas need to start financial literacy classes to explain to people what's going on here. Because if there's $50 million of debt, I think a majority of that's from people that don't understand and weren't educated about what the risks are here. And there need to be classes about this. Even in yeshiva, there's no secular studies. Sure.
Dan, let me add on to this.
Financial literacy classes.
Because I'm a business person. Anybody, and I say anybody who comes to you and says, let me have your credit card and you keep the miles, I need a loan that way, this is the person you should not be lending money to. That is such a wackadoodle business way to run your business. So somebody who is so unprofessional, this is the last person in the world you want to trust your home with. That's what you're doing. You're entrusting your home to this person. And
this is really just another case of affinity fraud, and it plagues our community. 5 years ago, I wrote about Sun Games and how that was a scam. And people sent me threatening voicemails telling me, take that down, we're going to sue you out into oblivion. People need to realize that these are affinity scams. People are preying on the fact that they look like a religious Jew. And many of them are honest. They are good firm Jews. But explain what
an affinity fraud is.
Affinity fraud is someone who targets a religious community. They target someone who looks like you, someone that you trust. You trust your neighbor. You trust the person who davens next to you in shul. You trust your chavrusa. You trust your mechutanim. You trust people. And if that person says, hey, here's a great way where you can make thousands of dollars a month without any risk, they might actually believe there's no risk. But the fact of the matter is that in any business, the best business in the world has risk. And in these scenarios, people need to go with their eyes wide open and realize this is cash. It's not a number on your computer screen. This is an actual amount of cash. And if you wouldn't hand over somebody a briefcase full of $500,000 in cash, don't give them your credit card to swipe, and definitely don't give them your Social Security number. If you give them your Social Security number, you're giving them authorization to do whatever they want with your credit for the rest of your life. It's absolutely crazy to hand over your keys like that. It's mind-boggling, and it's a tragedy. It's nothing short of a tragedy. I feel terrible for these victims, and they are victims in the end because they don't understand what they're doing, and my heart goes out to them. But this is something people need to take a lesson from and not let it happen to them, and we need to have an end to this. And I think that newspapers and magazines that are accepting advertisements for people who are buying Social Security numbers, they need to stop that. We need to call them out, and they need to have honest practices about what kind of advertisements they're accepting. I reject many, many ads every day in my own business because I don't feel that it's appropriate. And I agree with you, by the way.
I agree with you when you say the yeshivas should be talking about it. And absolutely. I believe the Gemara in Baba Metzi, and I'm going out on a limb here, I think it's Lamed Aleph Amid Bais, says Zu Beis Chayayim, that the job of the Gedolim are to teach people, the Rashi says, how to be misparnus and how to earn a living, how to earn an honest living. So teaching people...
Listen, if in the end of the day, this is, in yeshiva, they should be teaching that this refers to knowing finance. People need to know basic finance. And even a yeshiva where they're not going to teach secular studies, there needs to be something where people can go out into the world and realize they need to have financial literacy classes. It's that simple.
Now, are there other types of scams out there that you would like to bring attention to the Olam besides this? By the way, the Gemara it's the Gemara. I'm wrong. It's Bamimtzi Lamed Amid Bais. The Tani Rabbi Yosef v'haidat lahem ze Bais chayayim. So Rashi says that v'haidat lahem is going on the in other words on the leaders of the generation. Ze Bais chayayim. So Rashi says, Lilmoid lahem umnis lesparnis by chukais v'tayres ksiv bereisha dekra. It's the job of the Gedolei Hador Lilmoid behem umnis lesparnis behem. So you're saying that the leaders of the generation should be teaching. Give us an example of another scam out there that people get hurt about, innocent, sort of naive people, like financially illiterate people get hurt on. Could you think of another one?
I mean, there's many variations of the current one. People are going through an intermediary party, and there's a lawsuit that you can read about going on now where a nonprofit, a gemach, was swiping credit cards for people. And then they were giving those funds to a business. And the problem is that when the business doesn't pay back the original person, people are disputing the charge. But they're not disputing the charge from the business person. They're disputing the charge to the gemach. So the gemach now already paid out the business person cash. And people are disputing funds against the gemach. And this is that very dispute is very likely against halacha. And it's there's no basis to dispute it if you authorized it. So this is something that people need to realize that their credit card is cash.
Let me get your opinion as somebody who really understands how business works. You know, there was that clothing company, I think it was Land's End, that said when you buy an item, you could return it at any time. So people would buy children's items or adult items, wear them for 2 or 3 years, and then send them back and get them replaced with a brand new one. What's your
worse than that? LL Bean last year changed their policy from lifetime to 1 year because people were going around to garage sales on eBay and they were buying old LL Bean clothes and then they'd bring them back and they offered a full refund at any time. And they had to change that policy. I mean, this is clearly something that's not okay. This is not the intention of a return policy. And if people do want to take advantage of a return policy, banks like American Express offer 90 days where if you can't return something to a store, you can return it to American Express. And these are one of the benefits of using a credit card. There are many benefits of using a credit card, but it needs to be used appropriately. And people need to be educated about financial literacy. So this is something where the Olam needs to figure out how to get this out and get the word out and educate people properly.
Now, Dan, you were criticized a number of years ago and for when El Al made a pricing error, and I know you wrote a letter about it, which I read, they made a pricing error, and you put it up on the site, and I guess many people took advantage of it. And the criticism basically was that imagine if, like, for example, you know, you walk into a store one day in the neighborhood, and they see the guy, instead of making milk $1.10, made it 11 cents. So one thing you could do is go over to the proprietor and say, hey, the fellow mismarked the milk. The other way is to call up everybody you know in the neighborhood, put it on the show list. There's a line out there. They clean the guy's dairy count thing out because somebody made a pricing error. And people, when they looked at the El Al, they said, look, El Al made a genuine pricing error. Somebody hit the wrong button. And they got cleaned out by the Internet. And I know you wrote a response to that. But my first thing is, would you do it again? I mean, I'm just curious.
So after that case, there have been other price mistakes. There was a case where United Airlines had the same story going to Israel. And it turned out that United case was actually planted by a different airline. It was Widerøe Airlines of Norway. And they actually, the CEO of the company leaked to internet forum boards that there was this price mistake. And it went around the whole internet, all the blogs, and everybody read about the price mistake. But in the end, it was just for publicity. It was just for them to make some extra money. Hong Kong Airlines last year had a price mistake on business class tickets to Hong Kong for a few $100s. And the same story, like everybody said, it looks like a price mistake, it has to be a price mistake, but really it was just publicity. And they're telling people who took these tickets to please let people know on Twitter about their great deal. It's great publicity for these companies. Cathay Pacific earlier this year had a first-class tickets from Vietnam to America for $1,000 for a $30,000 ticket. The publicity that they said they got from this in the mainstream media was worth far more than the actual loss of the price mistake. Now, I mentioned in that response back then about LL that it's very different. First of all, an online price mistake.
Wait, can I just go back to what you were saying?
Sure.
If the guy in the grocery store, the milk is charged for 11 cents, there's a chance that it was done on purpose for publicity, that he wants the whole neighborhood coming to the store and, buying milk, because maybe if they buy milk, they'll buy cheese, maybe they'll buy diapers, I don't know, maybe they'll stop using Amazon. But notwithstanding that, I could see the concern about tweeting that because maybe it's not a mistake. Maybe it's a mekach tayis. The guy just, not even a question of I know, it's just a mekach tayis. He hit the wrong button. And if it's a mekach tayis, so it definitely could be planted, but it also could be a mistake.
Right. So as far as the mekach tayis goes, the great thing about an online transaction is that you could, before you fulfill it, you could still cancel it. So if there's a price mistake on Amazon, you can cancel the order. You don't have to fulfill the order. If there's a price mistake on any website, they can not send out the order. So they can decide, am I better off honoring this mistake? Is the publicity that I'm going to get better than the cost of the mistake? So every airline weighs that. And in recent years, some airlines have canceled tickets. They have decided that it's not worthwhile. United is one example of this, where they've decided that price mistakes are not worth honoring. Delta, on the other hand, has had several mistakes to Eretz Yisrael, to Los Angeles, where there were $50 first-class tickets that I read about. And they've decided to take the opposite direction, where they feel that the publicity they get from it is worth much more than the loss from the ticket. Now, in an airline industry where not every seat goes out full, it's hard to say that there's necessarily going to be an actual loss, because 20% of airline seats don't get used. So if they can fill up those extra seats with people on a price mistake, and they get amazing news coverage, and everybody keeps in mind, hey, remember when Delta honored that price mistake? It's much more valuable to them than having a seat go out empty, which they make no revenue on.
Now let's go back to the grocery store. You walk into this grocery store, your local grocery store, and the milk is 11 cents instead of $1.10. And the question is, do we tweet it out to the whole shul or not? Well, there's two reasons to say you should. One reason is maybe he's doing it for publicity. And reason number two is because a certain amount of waste, 10% of all milk products get spoiled and get thrown in the garbage, so it doesn't even cost the guy anything, right? So you could tweet it out.
It's still a physical item, though.
Yeah, but still, it would be thrown out in the garbage. You're saving him crate. You're saving him carting. Or do you say, maybe it's not a mistake. Very likely it's not a mistake. And as far as throwing it out, well, it could be over the course of the year he has 10 or 20% in empty seats, but it's also possible that today he wouldn't have, or maybe this batch of milk wouldn't go bad on him. So it's 10 or 20% averaged out over the year, but then you go on many LL flights that are 100% sold out. So I don't know. I would be very worrisome about tweeting to the whole shul that the guy mispriced his milk or his cheesecake, whatever it may be, because maybe I'm wrong. And if it's a mekach tayis, I'm over on Geneva.
Right. So as far as the physical item is concerned, though, it's very different, because if you have the owner of the store will realize if he's charging 11 cents for the milk, but if it's not the owner of the store, they might not pay attention to what the milk costs. So in that case, you're correct. I wouldn't do that in that case. However, on an online transaction where everything goes through an approval process, you still have the ability not to honor the transaction. You could say it's a mistake.
No, but I don't think airlines have that ability, because isn't there a law that once they put a line up, but they put up a price, they can't walk it back on tickets. That's what I've been told by the FAA. So they don't really have a choice once they put it online.
So that's no longer the case. They do have the option now to not honor it.
But at the time, I don't think they had it.
At the time, they didn't have it.
So my question is, if you walked into a store and the guy couldn't walk back the price, would it be ethical to say, let's tweet it out there, because I don't know, maybe he's advertising it, and maybe he's going to throw out 20%, so this way it doesn't cost him anything.
That's where Ina comes in, because on a gallon of milk, it's always the same price. You know when you go into the store that milk is going to cost $3.50 or whatever it costs. It doesn't just cost 35 cents. With airline tickets, I've flown on legitimate sales where they're $20, or a ticket should be $200. If I want to fly from Cleveland to New York, sometimes there are sales for $25. Sometimes if I want a last-minute ticket, it's $1,000. So there's not really a fixed price in the airline industry. There are sales. There are many times tickets to Eretz Yisrael for $400, and it's a regular price. So
yeah, but
is it fair to assume the person, do you know when that's a sale or when it's not a sale?
Right.
It's not always obvious in an airline ticket because there is no set price. There's such a wide range of prices that it's not always obvious.
So
there's not
let me
really
ask
a market
you a
rate
question.
for an airline ticket.
Dan, let me ask you a question. Do you have enough expertise to look at a ticket and say, this is a pricing mistake or not?
I don't think I do. I don't think I would know for sure. I mean, there are cases where I would know for sure. A $50 first-class ticket, sure. But if we're talking about a ticket at Israel, which is $300, $400, $500, there are sales like that all the time. Would I know that's for sure a price mistake? I mean, I could look into the ticket. I could see that normally they charge for fuel. Here they're not charging for fuel. Now, they don't always charge for fuel. Fuel is not always something that's charged separately. If it's not charged in this case, maybe yes, maybe no. In Eleff, for example, they're award tickets. When they sell an award ticket, they charge for fuel. But if you book it through Qantas Airlines, their partner airline, they don't charge for fuel in El Al. So is it a price mistake to book a ticket with Qantas when they're not going to charge for the fuel surcharge that El Al normally does when you're redeeming miles for a ticket? No, that just happens to be their policy.
So Dan, let me ask you a question.
It's not always obvious in this case.
I agree with that. But let's go back to the grocery.
With an airline ticket, the main thing in the grocery is that you have a set price.
Hello. The price is always. But there's sales.
There are sales, but usually they're advertised in those cases as a sale. Whereas an airline ticket, they don't advertise it as a sale. There just happens to be, hey, there's tickets right now from New York to Florida for $19. Is that a price mistake or is it a sale? There's no way to know. There's no way to know that case.
Okay. If you saw something on the airline ticket that was clearly mispriced, would you tweet it, or you would say at that point, I think if it's clearly mispriced, I wouldn't?
Again, I don't think it exists with an airline ticket. There are airline tickets that are given away for free.
If you saw a first-class ticket to Israel for $100, I mean, that's mispriced. It's never been done before. Would you tweet it, or would you say, I think that's an error and I wouldn't do it?
I asked my Rav this question, and I was told that in that case that I could tweet it. That's personally what my guidance is. But in every case where this happens, I always write that you should ask your own Rav what you should do. Should you take advantage of it?
So even on a $50 first ticket, you would tweet?
That was the guidance that I got when I asked the question.
Wow.
But again, as I write, whether you should do that yourself, that I can't tell you. Everybody should ask their own Rav what they should do in that scenario. And again, it's different today because the airlines can cancel that. So the airlines will notice it, and they will decide whether to honor it or not. Earlier this year, like I mentioned with Cathay Pacific, they had this $30,000 first-class ticket for $800. I wrote, people, you could ask your Rav what you should do in this case. However, Cathay decided that it would be worthwhile to get the publicity for this. So it was in their best interest for this to happen. And in many cases, like I mentioned, the airlines do this on purpose, where they the CEO of the airline is posting there's a price mistake just to drum up the publicity. So it's not obvious. It's definitely not obvious. And the airline can do what they want. Now, in the case of El Al could have also told people, that they have a chief rabbi. They could have told people it's not right. We would like people to voluntarily cancel their tickets. There would have been no regulation against that whatsoever. They could have absolutely done that. And you know what? I bet you that 99.9% of people would have canceled their tickets if they had said that. Instead, they said, they're very smart actually, they said, keep the ticket, enjoy the ticket, but your flight has a connection. If you'd like, we'll upgrade you to a nonstop flight. We'll only charge you an extra $150 to upgrade it. And many people paid an extra $150 each way to upgrade their tickets. And now El Al is charging not quite the regular price, but pretty close to what the regular price would have been, and people did it. So El Al could have acted differently if they wanted to. They didn't. They were happy with the publicity. I actually spoke to executives from El Al and afterwards, and they said they fixed this. They wouldn't happen anymore, but they actually did quite well from the whole thing in the end when people upgraded and the word got out, and the publicity was actually good for them. So not in every case is it actually leaked. Not every airline mistake is the airline writing online, hey, there's a price mistake just to drum up publicity. But in the end, many of them do honor it because the publicity is worthwhile for them. The actual cost to them is much smaller than it would cost to run even a single ad in a newspaper. So it winds up getting a much more publicity for them, and it drums up more business for them in the long term.
Well, Dan, it's nice to see that you have a Rav you ask all your shilas to. I think that's really something special. I would be very criticized by our audience if I didn't say you have the number one expert, the Mitzia, you're the Reb Chaim Briska of Mitzias, right? Share with us one Mitzia.
We post Mitzias every day on Dansfield, every single day. But if there's one Mitzia, it's this: credit cards are very scary. People need to realize that they're very dangerous. But what somebody sends me a message how they're able to do things that they never imagined they'd be able to do. It's something that's rewarding. So people need to realize that there's nothing wrong with signing up for credit card offers. There's nothing wrong with maximizing your miles and figuring out how you can travel around the world using these credit card points that you otherwise couldn't afford. And you can get some amazing deals like that. But people need to be aware that there's a downside to all this, and they need to use their credit card and use their credit and responsibly. Keep your Social Security number to yourself. Never share something like that. And that will be the best deal of all.
Dan, thank you very much for your time. Hatzlacha Rabbi with your sites.
Thank you so much. And I just want to clarify again that people need to, and I hope that you take this, I hope you take the lead on this, that we can start some sort of financial literacy classes going on in yeshiva.
Hello, you'll get 25 to 50,000 listens here. Okay?
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Koltov. Take care. Bye-bye.
Koltov.
We have the honor of having with us on the phone from Lakewood, New Jersey, Reb Shmuel Honigwachs. He's a Dayan in Bais HaVaad. He's a musmach of both Reb Shmuel Leibach and Lahavdil ben Achayim ben Achayim, Reb Shlomo Miller. Welcome, Rabbi Honigwachs.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Rabbi Honigwachs has been in Lakewood as well as in many other areas. Scandals about people lending out their credit cards for miles. So can you give us a little bit of an overview? Is there a shaila of Ribbis if you're getting the miles? If you're late on your payment and that person who you lent the card to wants to make that payment for you, is he being over on Ribbis at that point? And feel free to add any other questions that I didn't ask you.
Right. So this is actually one of the things in Ribbis, which is one of the most surprising concepts in Hilchos Ribbis, both to Rabbanim and the lay people. I haven't met a Ribbis expert who hasn't tried to get around this kind of concept because it's very, very perplexing. But there is a Gemara which says that if Ruvain borrows money from a non-Jew and then he lends that money to Shimon, who's a Jew, Shimon would not be able to cover Ruvain's Ribbis expenses to the non-Jew. So if a Jewish person would borrow money from a Goyish bank, and then he would go ahead and lend that money to a Jew, the second borrower would not be able to pay the first borrower's Ribbis expenses. That would apply to the situation that you were asking about, which is if Ruvain has a credit card and then he gives that credit card to Shimon, and Shimon runs up a bill and ends up causing Ruvain to be charged interest by the bank. So if Shimon were to go ahead and to pay that interest on Ruvain's behalf, on the face of it, he would seem to be in transgression of the Assur of Ribbis, as described.
Rabbi Honigwachs, could you differentiate by saying, if I borrow money from a bank and then lend it to so-and-so, that's a direct, I'm the borrower, and then I turn around in a second, and then secondarily I lend it to Shimon. However, in this case, this guy swiped the card, so in effect the loan went directly to him. So it's true I'm obligated on it, but I never got possession of it. Would you see that as a possible difference?
That is a very good point. That is a possible distinction. However, it would seem to be covered under the concept of arvus. There is a situation where if Ruvain were to become the Arev, in Halacha it's called the Arev Shleif Dutz, who's the only one who's responsible vis-a-vis the non-Jew, and then he goes ahead and the actual money is transferred from the non-Jew to the Jew, it would seem to also be prohibited. So it wouldn't necessarily help.
The Ayin Aleph, I think, right? Or maybe Ayin Ches, I don't remember.
Yeah, Ayin Aleph,
That's the case you're referring to. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, this was. I once had a very, very long and painful conversation with my chavrusa about this. We were really trying hard to see if we could get out of this Assur. But the conclusion that we came to was that even though the money is going directly from the non-Jew to the final borrower, since the only one who's responsible vis-a-vis the non-Jew is the first borrower, that would also be prohibited.
So then basically that person you would not be allowed to pay. The person who lent the credit card, the person who borrowed the credit card would not be able to pay interest payments if he was late, and if he did, it would in effect be that he's paying Ribbis to the first fellow.
Right, but there is one very important exception, which is if the second borrower never notified the first borrower that there was a Ribbis charge, and the bills were coming for some reason directly to the second borrower, so that the first borrower had no idea that the second borrower was running up this interest bill. In that case, it's mistaber to us, and we found some rayas that this would be permitted because the second borrower is considered to be a mazik. He's considered to be damaging the first, causing a damage to the first borrower by running up these Ribbis charges and never notifying him. There might be some other ways of explaining this heter, in addition to this a concept of mazik, but our conclusion was that this would be permitted if he did it without the first borrower's knowledge.
Could you explain why? I'm mazik him because I didn't notify him, right?
Right.
And if I had notified him, he would have had the ability to pay it by himself.
Right. So the fact that you didn't notify him caused him to have a hezek, which he couldn't avoid because he had no way of knowing that these Ribbis charges existed. And therefore, if the second borrower wants to pay it, he's not going to be paying Ribbis. He'll be paying to compensate the first borrower for the damage that he caused him. And he would probably be obligated to do this according to Choshen Mishpat as well.
Now, here's my question. If the dollar volume was large, which is in many of these cases because people are trying to get points, and they lend it to a businessman and the guy runs up a very large bill, if the first party did not have the ability to pay, so then if I were the second party, I would make the argument I wasn't mazik you. You had no ability to pay anyway. So you would need really a double case. You would need A, where he never tells him about it, and B, even if he told him about it, where he actually had the ability to prevent the damage. But if he didn't have the ability to prevent the damage, I wouldn't be a mazik. Would you agree with that or no?
No. So you're adding another point, which is also an important point. If let's say the second borrower didn't have permission to run up such a big bill, he was allowed, let's say, to borrow $3,000. He went and borrowed $20,000, and the first borrower can't pay. So that would be another angle that we could take to say that there's no Ribbis issue. And the explanation could be one of two things. First of all, you have this explanation of mazik, which we were discussing. And the second concept that we could introduce is that there's a Mishnah Melech brought down by Rabbi Eger and the Chavas Das and Simon Kuf Samach, who say that the Mishnah Melech says that the only time there's an Issur Ribbis is if the borrower actually solicits the loan from the lender and the lender is willing to give the loan. But if the borrower goes ahead and steals money from the lender, then the lender can charge interest on his money because that's not a loan which is covered in the Issur of Ribbis, since it's a theft rather than a loan. So in this case, since we're looking at, halachically we're viewing it as though Ruvain borrowed money from the bank and then lent it to Shimon, but if Shimon took the money without Ruvain's permission, then we would say that that's a theft rather than a loan.
Yeah, but I'm asking an additional point. Let's say Ruvain lent his credit card to Shimon and said, yeah, you could run up a big bill. And the guy runs up $50,000 or $100,000 because Ruvain wants the points. Now, Ruvain never has the ability to pay off this money. He couldn't even...
Right.
Right?
Right. So in that case, you're right. Yeah. So then you're gonna create then that's gonna be a Ribbis problem, because then Ruvain in that case knew that he wouldn't be able to pay the loan.
He's not a mazik by not doing it.
Right. And
So what about so realistically the heter that we're discussing, which is you can pay the interest if you didn't notify the other person. Since credit card companies work is they always send their bill to the holder of the card, not to whoever he gives it out to. It's a pretty unlikely scenario. Would you agree?
Right. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, there is a situation where they sign up for paperless billing, and for some reason the credit card owner allows the borrower to have access to the website, and the owner never checks it, and he relies on the borrower that the borrower would go ahead and pay every month as he's supposed to. That might be a scenario.
If you were a business or a friend, you borrowed somebody's card, and you missed the payment, and that person now has interest due, and you feel very badly about it, is there anything you can do?
You're saying if the person knew that there was a payment, that there was a mispayment, the middle person.
Of course he knew. He gets his credit card bill
every month. He gets the credit card bill, and the final borrower didn't pay, and therefore the middle person didn't pay the credit card bill. So in that case, the eitzah would be to write a heter iska at this point to be able to, going forward, cover the ribbis that had already been charged in the past.
So you can do a retroactive heter iska?
It's not really retroactive. What they're doing is they're saying like this: look, I really want to give you a certain amount of money, and I am making money on your money. So let's write a heter iska going forward that in the coming month you're going to lend me, let's say, another $10,000, and this coming month I will pay the bill on time, and we're going to charge interest this coming month, which is equivalent to the interest that was charged in the previous month, which I really wanted to pay. So even though you're willing to give me a free loan, since I'm making money, I can volunteer to say, you know what, instead of taking the free loan, I'm willing to accept the money as a iska and give you some of my profits because I want to cover, I mean, the rationale for that is because I want to cover that thing that I want to feel badly for. Now, there's a big question in the place of how much of this you're allowed to speak out, because if you mention why you want to pay this ribbis, that might bring up some ribbis issues as well.
The heter iska would work for future payments. Is there anything he can do about the missed payment?
Well, what I'm trying to say is, I mean, this is a general issue that comes up with heter iska. Sometimes people will borrow money and they neglect to make a heter iska, and they promise to pay interest, and now they find themselves unable to do so, and they really want to be honest about it. So, what the suggestion that we give is that if it's still in the middle of the term of the loan, you can now write a heter iska that covers both the future payments and the previous payment.
Today, when you give somebody a loan, you're doing them a taiva. And if you give them a reasonable interest rate, you're doing them a big taiva, right? If you're charging 18%, 20%, if you the Yellowstone they charge 400%. This is neshech shenoishech in Bais.
Right.
But if you give somebody, here's $1 million at 4%, you're giving the person a tremendous opportunity.
Right.
Right. And yet the Torah asers it. Could you explain from a sort of a Taimei HaMitzvah's point what the svara is?
It's a very good question. I mean, the Gemara in the end of Ezel Neshech says that that's really the mindset of people who lend b'ribos. They say, look, if Moshe Rabbeinu would have understood how good it is to lend and borrow b'ribos, then he would have allowed it. But I mean, I guess that the concept here is that the Torah is obligating a person to offer his money as a free loan. It's a mitzvah in the Torah to offer money as a free loan, and we're not allowed to go ahead and charge ribos as part of that mitzvah. There's a mitzvah if somebody needs a loan, just like there's a mitzvah to give tzedakah, to give a certain amount of money to tzedakah. There's also a mitzvah if somebody needs a loan, give it to him as a free loan, and don't charge ribos. So it's true that you're doing a taiva by charging 4%, but it will be a bigger taiva to charge 0, and that's actually what we're obligated to do because of the mitzvah of lending to another person.
So lending to another person is a mitzvah saseh, right?
Right.
So that means at the greatest amount you would have to give a chaimish, up to a chaimish, right?
Right.
So if a person goes beyond that and they put more than a fifth at risk, and not only that, the chaimish could be to many different people, not just to this one person.
Right. Right.
So if I chose you to be the recipient, A, of all of my chaimish, or certainly of more than my chaimish,
Right.
I'm still doing you a very big favor, more than the mitzvah of any mitzvah say would be mechayev.
Right. That's a very good question. I mean, you're tying. Yeah, the Chofetz Chaim speaks out clearly that the mitzvah of lending money is also has the same restriction that you're not obligated to do more than meiser and you're not and certainly not more than a chaimish. So you're asking that if a person's lending more than a chaimish, why wouldn't the Torah allow him to charge ribbis? So that's I don't know the right answer to that. It could be that this is like a sort of a loy plug that the Torah is putting in place in order to make sure that those free loans are available. The Torah goes ahead and assurs any kind of ribbis, so that way people will end up doing free loans. Whereas if ribbis was allowed, then it would be maybe more difficult to force people to do the free loans. I don't know if that's the correct answer. I mean, obviously the alternative is that you can do some kind of iska, where you actually earn some money on your money, which is what you're allowed to do once you filled up your commitment of meiser or chaimish. Then you're allowed to go ahead and go and lend or do a heter iska or other kinds of iskas, other kinds of business deals, rather than making the loan.
Okay. Now, what about lending a credit card to somebody? Not lending a credit card, giving a credit card for somebody to allow him to borrow on your credit line so that you could get miles. Do you see any problem with ribbis on that? I'm getting my money back and I'm getting ribbis, even though it's from another party.
Right. So when it comes to miles, to me, there's a question who the miles really should belong to in the Choshen Mishpat. Once you accept that there's a suffix about who the miles should belong to, so then there shouldn't be any ribbis problem, because the lender might be entitled to the miles from a Choshen Mishpat point of view, so he would not be receiving any benefit from the lender because of the loan. I mean, from the borrower because of the loan, because he's anyways entitled to it from a Choshen Mishpat point of view.
In a Choshen Mishpat, the bank is giving to Ruvain, to the lender of the credit card, right?
Right.
And therefore,
so it's possible that there's a big question who the miles really should belong to in Choshen Mishpat. It's possible that the miles should belong to Ruvain. If the miles indeed belong to Ruvain, then he would not be receiving any benefit from Shimon the lender as a result of the loan, because he anyways is entitled to the miles mitzad Choshen Mishpat. So
but he wouldn't get them in Choshen Mishpat if Shimon didn't borrow the money and then give him back the money that he borrowed.
What do you mean?
If the credit card company enters into a deal with Ruvain, they give him a credit card.
Oh, that's what you mean. You mean if Shimon had never borrowed the money in the first place?
So Shimon is borrowing.
But you're back. Right. So but there's a concept of ribbis that's not coming miloy v'lamalva. So if the ribbis is being given by the bank, that's not a problem. The only question will be if Shimon would really be entitled to those points, and Shimon is giving up his right to them because of the loan, then that would be a question. But as far as the fact that you're deriving benefit,
Now let me ask you another question. When people, let's say, buy or sell points,
right?
And the contract with the bank says specifically the points are not transferable. So you have a fellow like Ruvain, he runs up 100,000 miles of points, spends $100,000, gets 100,000 points, then sells these miles to Levi, so that Levi can then go get airfare and a hotel room of those 1,000.
Right.
The contract says specifically is not transferable. Is Levi a ganef by buying it, and is Ruvain also participating in the geneva that he's facilitating the geneva from the credit card issuer?
Right. So I mean, this is getting into a very thorny issue. There's a lot of different kinds of opinions about these types of things. It should be pointed out that not every credit card contract says specifically that you're not allowed to sell it. Some of them just say that if you sell them, then the credit card company reserves the right to cancel the entire account, to void all the points that the person has. So if that's the language, then an argument can certainly be made that they're not doing anything wrong. If the language specifically says that they're not allowed to sell the points, then that's seeming...
It says they're non-transferable.
Right. It says non-transferable. Yeah, that would seem to be a serious issue of Gzela. And I want to also point out that besides for the issue of Gzela, there's another concern that I haven't noticed that people think about, which is that with the buyer of the points, generally what they do is they book high-end tickets with these points, and it seems that it has happened in the past that travelers could be stranded because the bank realizes at the last minute that the points were sold fraudulently, and they at times they end up canceling the ticket and leaving travelers stranded. So you run into a very big issue of mekach, and you also run into an issue of the Gemara that says in the end of Azov that you're not allowed to sell something to somebody that he could use to trick other people with. So if the travel agents aren't being 100% honest about what the source of the ticket is, if it's a miles ticket or not, then they are they're selling something which has a very big mum in it, and the person who enabled that was the person who sold them the miles in the first place. So I'd like to see people at least think about that concept and come up with some kind of reason why that shouldn't be a problem before people go ahead and blithely sell these miles to others, not being concerned about the consequences.
So if I sell something that I have no right to sell, and I receive money for it, would that make me a gazlan in effect?
No, you're not a gazlan. The correct definition of what the person will be doing was what you mentioned before. They would be doing lifnei iver possibly on the buyer who's going to be actually using the miles. The main person that has to be concerned
if I sell something that I don't own, does that make me a thief?
Well, both parties know that you don't own it, right?
Right.
The people purchasing the miles also know it. So if you sell something you don't own, you're not a thief, because the buyer is giving you the money knowing that you don't really have a right to it, and he's willing to take a chance that he has that he's going to be able to use that stolen item. The person who's ultimately the ganav, so to speak, if we consider this person to be a ganav, is the final buyer who actually uses the miles.
And would the seller be over on lifnei iver?
Yeah, it's all be over lifnei iver, but the issue with telling people that they're over lifnei iver is that there's a heter for lifnei iver, which is that if you could find one rav who's matir it, so then you're not over lifnei iver, because you could say that this person is being samech on his rav. So it's not like such an effective way to get people to stop doing things. I tell them to be over lifnei iver.
Is there a rav who says you can sell something even though the contract doesn't allow it? You say there's one rav. I would like to speak
I don't
to
know.
that.
I don't know. I don't know who that rav is, but I assume that there must be a rav because I see everybody doing it. So it must be that somebody was matir this.
Well, I know a lot of people speak lashon hara. Maybe you could find me the rav who's matir that.
Right. I hear. I hear you.
Because we would love to speak to that. We would love to speak to that rav. Are there any other issues about lending out your credit card, buying or selling miles that you think we didn't discuss today, that I didn't ask you?
Oh, I had actually a very interesting din Torah. This is one of my first dinei Torah, where there was actually a miles merchant who bought miles from many people and he sold them to another person. And
a professional ganav.
Yeah, professional ganav, exactly. And Lamaisa, what happened was that this merchant never got paid. The final buyer ended up not paying him. So the question was whether this sale is binding halachically, and would the buyer be obligated to pay, which led us into a very interesting discussion about davar she'ein bo mamish and davar shloi bo la'olam.
Well, wait, before that. So Reuven sold his tickets to a travel agent, his miles, which he had no right to transfer, and then Shimon then sold the geneva, in effect, to Levi.
Right.
And Levi didn't pay Shimon, so Shimon called Levi to a din Torah to pay him for the miles which Shimon had stolen.
Right.
And which were not really evaluated. I saw a tshuva in a sefer, I can't make this up, where a Rav, he said a boy in his yeshiva had a friend who needed to go to the doctor.
Right.
And so the boy, he was from Canada. He didn't have any medical cards. He said, look, I have a Medicaid card. I'm going to give you my Medicaid card, and you'll say you're me. We look alike to the doctor. So he goes to the doctor. He gives him the Medicaid card of the other boy, and then the first boy got billed. It seems Medicaid didn't cover the entire thing.
Right.
So they went to it in Torah. He says, when you gave me the Medicaid card fraudulently, you meant to cover my whole bill. The other guy says, when I gave you the Medicaid card fraudulently, I meant only for the part that I could defraud Medicaid and not pay you. Watch the halacha on the other part.
Right.
Sounds like that we should send a Shiloh to that Rav, no?
Yeah. Einachanami. I mean, L'maisa, you have to paskin these shilohs also. You know, you can't just a bezin has to also deal with both when both sides are crooks. Which crook gets paid and which crook doesn't? You know.
So what did you paskin? So what did you?
So we ended up paskening that he has to pay. That's what the bezin ended up paskening.
He has to pay the ganef for the stolen goods that he had no right to give him.
Yeah.
Could you explain the psak?
It was a complicated psak. I mean, the main issue that we were discussing. I mean, the question was not really the fact that the sale was binding. It was more of a question of causing another person a benefit. So when Ruvain, the merchant, sold the miles to Shimon, the final buyer, he was causing him hana by allowing him to book tickets. So we basically put this under the concept of zenen of zechasar, and we said that since Shimon is being nene, and there's somebody all the way in the back of the line who's being chasar because he can't use his miles, so Mamela, we said that it was considered that the first owner of the miles was Mahana, the last owner of the miles, and that would set this whole chain of sales into progress, because even though it's not a sellable item necessarily, but you are causing the person a benefit which you're able to charge for. That was the basic concept behind the psak din.
Now, if the agreement says, which most of them do, it's non-transferable, and if transferred, they're void, would you still say he has to pay the first guy?
Yeah, there's actually a very interesting nesivus that discusses a case where you take a piece of land that's stolen and you go ahead and you sell it to somebody else. And the nesivus says that you cannot void that sale until the nigzal comes along and demands for his property to be returned. And the nesivus says because something which is stolen can really be sold and can really be bought. It's just that the nigzal could go ahead and be mevatel that mechira. So that might be a concept that we could apply over here.
Until he was mevatel the mechira is chal. It's sort of like Yish, you're saying. Very interesting.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Rabbi Honigwachs, thank you very much for clarifying this inyan to us. Thank you for your time.
Anytime. Okay, you're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
We have on the phone with us from Lakewood, New Jersey, Rav Moshe Royde. He grew up in London, learned in Manchester, South Fallsburg, Brisk, and then later on, for many years in Lakewood, he learned in the Kollel Choshen Mishpat by Rabbi Eliyahu Levine. He's an expert in Ribbis. Welcome, Reb Moshe.
Hello. Yes. Good morning.
So, Reb Moshe, if somebody gives their credit card to somebody they know with the intent that that person would use it, run up a bill on it, then pay the credit card, and then for some reason the person doesn't make the payment, whatever the case is, we'll hear later on, we have Dan's deals on. He's going to talk about the many cases where people, it's like lending money to somebody, and many people don't pay back their loans. So now you are stuck with the bill, and when you get the credit card, you have the principal, and you also have the interest, because if you don't pay it back within 30 days, they start clicking interest, usually at 16 or 18%. Now, at some point, the person who you gave the credit card to comes back, apologizes. He says, here, I ran up a bill of $50,000. Here's a check for $50,000. And how much did you say the interest was for the month? Well, $50,000 at 18%, give or take, it's going to be something like, $1,000 for the month, let's say. And he says, here's $1,000. Are you allowed to take the $1,000? Are you allowed to take the interest payment from him, or is it a shiloh of Ribbis? And let me just for our listenership, why would I explain why is it Ribbis? Because when this fellow borrows the money, he uses your credit card, legally, you are borrowing from the bank. right? The bank doesn't recognize the other person, and then you are lending it to your friend or to this business associate, so that when he pays you the $50,000 plus the extra $1,000, he's paying you back principal and $1,000 interest, which then you would in turn around and pay back to the credit card company that lent you the money. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm taking interest from my friend. So am I allowed to be paid back by him?
Yes. She'elaf Chochem Chati Tshuva, and the question had in it most of the answer. A person, the Rishonim have a case, they explain it in the Gemara, of Orev Shloif Deutz. Orev Shloif Deutz is like this. Usually an Orev is a guarantor on a loan, so we have a loiva who borrows the money from the malva, and then we have a guarantor who tells the malva that I will pay back if he doesn't end up paying back. And Orev Shloif Deutz, the Ramah explains, Shloif Deutz means his hands are washed. That means that the Orev takes the money from the malva, and the malva only knows about the Orev, and then the Orev passes on the money to the loiva. In this case, if it would be a case of Ribbis, if the malva is a goy, for example, and the malva demands his Ribbis only from, and the Karen, the principal, only from the Orev, and the Orev would like to go to the loiva and tell the loiva, look, I didn't use the money, you used the money, please give me back everything, Karen plus Ribbis, it is Assur. That is Gepaskin and Simon Kuf Ein in your idea that it's Assur. Now, many people, when they hear this halacha, that someone who lent someone else a credit card, he did someone else a favor, and he never used the money. He would never had derived any benefit from this money. And then he's on the hook for paying the Ribbis. They don't understand, how can a person be punished for doing someone a favor? So this wasn't ignored by the Poskim, and if I can read the Lashon of the Torah, as in Simon Kuf Ayin, he has this case of Yisrael Shalova Moyes Migoy B'Ribbis. A Yid borrowed money from a goy b'Ribbis. Only Yisrael likonis orev b'shviloi. Another Yisrael cannot become the guarantor for him. Now, later the Torah quotes, "V'kosav harav Yitzchak Karkuza." One of the Rishonim, Yitzchak Karkuza, says, "V'nireh heichad leikabel aleya shlei litoy la'avtchel." In a case where it was also for them to do it. V'natzali orev, he became an orev u'peireya b'shviloi, and he pays for him. The orev goes and pays the Karen and the Ribbis. The loiva has to pay him the full hefsed, the full loss, including the Ribbis. The davke lechatchila who the Assur aval b'diavad yeshalem kol hefsed. B'diavad he has to pay all the hefsed kimid the machmasoka pasid because he had the loss because of him, because the orev shloif deutz had a loss because of the end loiva. So the end loiva has to pay back that loss. So the Torah says ve'eino nireh. This doesn't seem to be correct. The kiven sheyesh bo tzad isa because there's a tzad isa lama nechayvenu lefroya beisa. We cannot be mechayev him to pay be'isa, and even though other have said him, he would be chayev Ribbis, he's not chayev. This would seem to be a machlokes, the Rika Kuza and the Torah. If it's mutter to pay back, they have said him the losses that the person accrued. The Taz explains that the Rika Kuza never meant that it's mutter to pay the losses. All he meant was something else, something called Tzad Echad B'Ribbis. It's only in the case of an Orev where we're not sure who's going to end up paying the money, the Loiv or the Orev. But when it's clear that the person paying back the Malveh is the first Yid, the Bala credit card, the fellow whose name is on the credit card, there's no way, even according to Rika Kuza, that he can take his losses back from the other person. So, as you said in the question, this would be Assur, and the person has to be very careful not to take money not to lend his credit card unless he's 100% sure that the other person will pay him back. Now, some people want to say that even if you're sure the other person will pay you back, it could still be Assur to lend your credit card. The person is going to pay back.
So let me just go straight, because to you you're obviously an expert in very complicated Hilchos Rebbe, so most of our listenership isn't. So bottom line is, let me just repeat, if you give your credit card out to somebody to run up miles on it, if that's the purpose, and he goes late on the payment, you are not allowed to take the interest payment from him, even though he damaged you. You can only take the principal to pay back, but you're going to have to go out of pocket, and he's not allowed to give it to you. In other words, he can't say, I'm giving it to you as a favor, I'm a tana. He's not allowed to give it to you. So if he goes late on that loan, right, not only could you lose your principal if he doesn't pay you back, but even if he pays you back the principal, you are totally finished, and you would have to pay back. So, for example, in our case where somebody swiped $50,000, And the interest rate, it's a little bit less than $1,000 if you're running at 18%. Let's just make it easy, $1,000. On $50,000, the value of the points is around 1 to 2%, right? So 1% would be 1/100th of the 50,000. So would be around $50. If it's 2%, would be 100. So you may be getting $100 in value from him. So your upside is to get 100. Your downside is A, to lose the $50,000. B, if you get the money back and he pays late, is to lose $1,000 because you can't take the interest from him. So it's a 10-to-1 loss on the interest, right? And it's a 100-to-1 loss on principal. So the question is, would you consider that a good investment? I certainly don't. But continue.
The thing is, the case slightly changed in the last repeating. And at the beginning, we're talking about the person lending his friend his credit card, and he's doing his friend a favor. Just now, we had a different case where you gave the other person the card in order to be able to get the miles.
And that's I know, and that you're going to ask a very obvious question. You're going to ask, are you allowed to do that, or is that a shiloh of Ribbis?
No, not that the miles should be a shiloh of Ribbis. No, it's a whole different thing. The actual miles you're not getting the miles from the loiver, you're getting the miles from someone else. But it could be different regarding this actual case when a person gives his credit card to someone else to accrue miles. There are businesses that tell people, hey, if you open a few credit cards, you can get yourself a large line of credit, and you accrue a bill of $5,000 on each card, then you get a sign-up bonus, you get 200,000 points or miles or whatever it is. So the person says, yeah, but I have a life to live. I can't be busy buying stuff and selling it on eBay. It's not what I do with my time. So the fellow says, no problem. Give me your social security number and your exact name or whatever details you need. I'll open the cards for you. I'll rack up the bill. I'll pay it back in time, and we'll split the miles. We'll do a deal together. And in such a case, when a person does such a thing, the businessman who's opening the accounts, as opposed to the person who has his name on the bills, knows what's going on. He's the one who is on top of the bills. The bills come to his house, and he's the one who is supposed to be paying back and taking care of it. Now, if he defaults, if he doesn't manage to sell the stuff, or he's a ganef, or he gets lazy, or whatever happens, for whichever reason, he doesn't end up paying in time, and Ribbis accrues. And again, it's in the name of the Bala credit card, the Bala social security number, and because it's in his name, the bank is going to come after him. So in such a case, it might be a little bit different. And that splits into two different cases. David Yaslovsky was married to me a Chuvas Marashdam that has a case of a shutef who was supposed to send schora, and he didn't send it in time. And because of that, the lekeach, or whoever it was, demanded Ribbis from them. And the shutef says, hey, you messed up. You have to pay me. And the other fellow said, I wasn't mazik. I didn't do anything. I just didn't send you the schora. So the other shutef is complaining, you were mazik me. Is it groma? What is it? So the Marshdam says this is garmi. This is a hezek the person is to blame for. He shouldn't have done this. He should have warned him. He should have sent it in time. And for not sending it in time, he is achroi for all hezekes, including the ribbis that that they will have to pay to the other person. So, in this case, where the other person, the one who's opening the credit cards, he knows everything about the case. He knows. And if he would have told the Balak social security number that I can't pay. Something about stop, I can't pay. The Balak social security number could quickly have run to a gemach and paid off the Karen so the Ribbis won't accrue. Then he would have saved him. And by not telling him, by not informing him, he has caused him a hezek, and he would have to pay for that hezek, for the damage he did by not telling him. So as soon as he tells him, he's part of many future ribbis, but the ribbis that accrued until he told him, he would be chayav for. But as I said, it's not so simple.
Wait, but slow down, Rabbi Royde. I'm not following you. Why, in the case of the Gemara, right? The Gemara is on Ayin Aleph in Ezen Neshech, right?
Yeah.
Where somebody becomes an Arav for somebody, and that person goes ahead and misses their payments, right? The Erev would not be allowed to make the payment. Now, why can't the argument be made that why can't the Erev go back to the loiva and say, look, you damaged me by not paying in time, so al dina de garmi, you're a mazik. Why is that different than the case of the marjdam that you're mentioning?
Okay, this is where the chiluk is that I want to mention. There's a chiluk, two different ways of setting up this deal. And I spoke this to Levine was very strong on this svara. We discussed it yesterday. The case of the Gemara is that a person is an Arev, and the deal between the Arev and the Loiva is that the Loiva will reimburse the Arev on any money that he pulls out of his pocket. So if the Arev pays off the Chayv, the Loiva will pay it. If the Arev pays Ribbis, the Loiva will pay it. The Loiva keeps on, in lieu of receiving the money, the Loiva is makabel on himself to pay back the Arev. So to consider the Ribbis that accrues Hezek is only when he has to pay something that he's not going to be reimbursed. In the case of the person who actually tells him, I'm going to pay you back. I took this money and I'm going to pay you back any Hezekas. And the Loiva tells the Arev, don't worry, if you continue not paying and more Ribbis accrues, I'll pay for that too. And he keeps on telling him the same thing. You can trust me and I'll pay you back. So there is no hezek, there's no hefsed, because he is mischayev to pay it back. And why is he paying it back? Because he borrowed the money at the beginning. The Ribbis comes before the hezek. So now when it comes time to pay, and he takes the money out of his pocket and he gives it to Arev, and the Arev says, no, I have a Torah that says, okay, too bad, I can't pay you. But there was no hezek. This was a chiv Ribbis that you're not allowed to pay. And just like if you borrow money by Ribbis, and then when it comes time to pay, he does tshuva, and he doesn't want to pay it, there was no hezek. It was just, I borrowed money by Ribbis. So the same would be over here, in this case, when the person was Narev, and the other person wants to pay him back. And we wouldn't call it hezek. And therefore, when you lend your credit card to someone else for the other person's purposes, and you tell him, you can use it, just make sure I don't have to suffer from it, then the other person will use it, and it's understood that the other person will pay back any hefsedim. That would be Ribbis, and that would be Assur. But in the case of giving your card to someone, giving your social security number to someone, and telling him, you open the card, and we'll split the miles. And there's a mutual benefit to it. They're both having benefit. The owner of the social security number might get the bonus miles. The other person will have capital, or he'll take some of the miles for himself. In this case, they are partners in the benefit. And therefore, there's no way the Loiva can tell. If absent any issue of Ribbis, the Loiva, the Baal social security number, would not be able to tell the businessman that, hey, you took the money for yourself, you have to make it good. Because the guy can say, 1 second, you also joined in. So
the bottom line is, Rabbi Royde, you're saying that you want to be mechalik and say that there is a tzad to say that if it's a credit card that you did a favor for, you couldn't accept the interest payment. But if it was done as a business transaction, you're saying according to this marjdam, you should be able to make the payment.
If you didn't know that the Ribbis accrued. If you didn't know that the Ribbis accrued, if you can make him pay for not telling you in time. When
somebody lends out their credit card for miles, so I lend you the car. I'm not lending. I allow you to take a loan from my account. You're going to give me back the money, and I'm also getting from the bank the benefit of 50,000 miles. Let's say, I don't know, it'd be 500 miles, say, right? My question to you is, which is worth around someplace between $5 and $10. So my question to you is, would that be a problem of Ribbis that I'm getting back $50,000 plus I'm getting back another $10?
So we have a rule. The Gemara says a rule: in Ribbis ela haba miloiva lemalve. The Ribbis has to come from the loiva to the malve. If somebody else gives the Ribbis to the malve, there would be no issa. The intention of the credit card company is only for the person whose name appears on the credit card. They don't care about anything else. They have no benefit from the fact that this person went and chose this shop. Whatever happens, it's the owner of the credit card company. And therefore, the miles and points are given only for the owner of the credit card company, the loiva of theirs. It's a gift they give their loiva. And because of that, there should be no Ribbis from the fact that someone else used it and someone else accrued those miles and points.
So, Rabbi Royde, let me ask you another question, Royde. If the credit card company says contractually that you're not allowed to buy or sell the miles, and somebody goes, this is not a Ribbis question, a Gzela question, but you're a Choshen Mishpat Kollel. Somebody goes ahead and they run up the miles, they get 50,000 miles, and they sell them to somebody else, or alternatively, they need money for a ticket, they buy miles. Is it Gzela?
Is it Gzela? So a person owns the rights on Delta, let's say, to have a flight or on a hotel to have a room one night, and he takes that right and it's non-transferable. They tell them, I'm only giving it to you, and then this person went and pays for the room, and the room belongs to the Bala credit card, the Bala points, and he invites his friend, says, you can go and sleep in that room instead of me. So he's living in someone else's house and he doesn't have a right. So the halacha would be, it's a hotel, it's a chotzer the kaimala agra. It's standing there that people should pay money to rent it. Is it a gavir the avid lamega? If he's not the homeless person, he needs somewhere to stay, so he should be chayav to pay. The problem is that he's paid already. Someone paid the hotel by using his right on the points. So it would be a gazela with a piroin if at worst you stole and you paid it straight back, which the Gemara Dashans they
my question is it stealing from the credit card company? If I say the credit card company says, Ruvain, you run up X, I'm going to give you a dollar of points for every whatever the case is, mile you run up, right? Now, I think it's a penny for every dollar, 2 pennies per dollar. That's the way it counts. Okay, so Reuven goes ahead and he sells it to Shimon. So Shimon then goes to a hotel, and the credit card company then pays the hotel the amount that Shimon requests using Reuven's pseudo points. The credit card company was not supposed to pay for Shimon. They were only supposed to pay for Reuven. They don't know that it's not Reuven. They don't know that Shimon bought the points. So in effect, they are being moitzi mamain to pay for this hotel room for Shimon that shouldn't be. So isn't it in effect like, it's almost like going to a supermarket using fake ID and using somebody else's account. In other words, they are paying, the bank, who in this case is the credit card company, is paying for the room that Shimon is using, even though they would not pay for it. That was not the contractual agreement. If Shimon would, if Reuven can't use it, he would forfeit the points. Is that gzevel or not?
So let's take your marshal and take it just one step further. A person goes into the store and says, my name is Moshe Groinem, and I want to put something on my account, and he puts it on Moshe Groinem's account, and straight away or afterwards or even before, he puts $100 onto Moshe Groinem's account. So Moshe Groinem ends up not losing anything. Right? So in this case, the credit card company has given the room to the Bala points. They're paid for a room that Reuven should have where to stay tonight. In some other town, in Los Angeles, Reuven spends the night in New York, but he has a room in Los Angeles that's paid for by his points. It's Reuven's room now, because that's who the Bala points decided to buy it for, and they won't buy it to anyone else. Reuven goes and shares his room with Shimon. Reuven allows Shimon to sleep in his room.
But that's not what's happening, because Reuven doesn't even know who Shimon is. Reuven is selling them through some anonymous broker on the internet. He never knows who Shimon is. He has no idea that Shimon is using this room. He doesn't even know what Shimon's using, which hotel, where he's going. So if Reuven went ahead and he rented the room, and then he called up Shimon. Wait, and he said to Shimon, I'm giving you the room. So you're right, in that case, Reuven rented the room and he gave it to Shimon. But here Reuven didn't rent the room. He sold the points and he took money for the points, and the contract says you're not allowed to sell the points. So it's not that Reuven is renting the room and he's giving it to Shimon. He's doing a transfer that he wasn't allowed to do, the entire transfer. Shimon is doing something that has nothing to do with Reuven. So it's not a case where I rented the room and I gave it to you.
Right. So the transfer of points, that is it's in reality it's some kind of a legal fiction or financial fiction. There's no actual point. There's no actual point. There's no Royde.
But remember, all money today is a fiction. When you do a credit card, the money never came into your account. The money never left your account. It's all digital on some computer someplace. So is somebody allowed to steal on a credit card because they say, look, there was no money that transferred hands. It's just electronic money.
The Mishnah says in this, Oiliam Oima, Oiliam Lo Oima. You're giving people ideas how to steal. But it has to end up with an answer. You're asking a very good question. And what is the answer? If you tell a credit card company to go and pay Walmart for a case of plastic cups, and Walmart gives you the case of plastic cups, Walmart, and in reality it wasn't your credit card, it was someone else's. So you went to fool the credit card company to give the money. So the credit card company gave somebody else's money for this case of cups. The credit card company is the one who gets to say what the money buys, for whom the money buys and what the money buys. And the person who gave the credit card company, who's going to owe the credit card company the money, is the one who says that. And therefore, the box of cups that you buy in Walmart, someone Ganef buys in Walmart on a stolen credit card, in reality belongs to the owner of the credit card. And the Geneva is on the box of cups. The actual credit card number is the Dov Shein by Mamish. That's not what he's stealing. What he's stealing is the box of cups.
Well, wait. So you're saying that the theft of the credit card money is not Geneva, right?
On its own, no. It would not be a Ma'aser Geneva.
Okay.
How would you pay careful? Okay.
So I'm asking you, so if using somebody else's credit card is not Geneva, so then why is the box of cups Geneva?
Because the box of cups belongs to the person whose name's on the credit card.
The same way it's not Geneva because it's just digital money, right? So I would make the sense that I used something of yours that is just digital. It's not real money. So therefore, whatever I was kind of with it doesn't belong to you either. It's just digital. If we're going to discount the fact that the money is digital, so if I could take your credit card, then the titleness of the credit card, right, I could certainly take which are the cups. It's Kabbalah. I'm saying if I could take your digital money, I could certainly take you the titleness of the digital money, right?
I'm winging you right now. I'm not properly prepared on this, but I remember the Ktsois says that the Gemara says all over the Shtoris is ein guf on mammon. And
right.
I remember the Ktsois says always, Shtoris ein guf on mammon doesn't mean that the Chayiv isn't mammon. The Chayiv is mammon. Just the getting to the Chayiv through the star is not taking mammon. If you borrow a star, or you're mazig a star, or you're a shomer on a star, you're not the shomer on the mammon that the star is supposed to be mitzi. But the actual chayiv is gufay mammon. And it's nafka min l'gabi pidin aben. But anyway, what I'm saying here is like this. Digital money is something that I own. I own that digital money. Just
right.
Stealing it isn't a ma'aser gzela. It's not a ma'aser geneva.
Okay, so the bottom line is, let's go back to our case. Wait, so going back to our case, you had no right to transfer this. And the minute you transfer it, right, any money, they become void. So any money that they are mitzi on your behalf is really stolen money at that point, right?
So you bring in a new point into this. I hadn't thought of this. You're saying that the actual doing this voodoo, this non-existent transaction of transferring points, which in Halacha may be a Dov Shein B'Mamish, but they made it tonight. You can only have these points. We'll only spend money for you and buy things for you and book rooms for you if you keep our conditions. And our conditions are, do not do this funny transfer. And if you do it, you forfeited them and you never had a right to them in the first place. And therefore, the person who sold the points is stealing from the credit card company.
Yeah, the person who stole it, and the person who's the beneficiary is in effect also.
He's dealing in stolen goods.
Right.
So again, I don't know exactly the regulations, and I don't know how the Din D'Alchusa works on this, but it sounds right. If it's taka against the contract, I just find it hard to imagine that a business that's so open, so out in the open, is completely and totally under the carpet.
But Rabbi Royde, regardless of the contract says specifically in the credit card agreement that if you transfer the points, they are void.
Oh, okay.
Right. So the fact that they are or are not aggressive in pursuing it, it doesn't override the contractual agreement. Rabbi Royde, let me ask you a question. What questions haven't I asked you? You're an expert in Ribbis, credit cards. Where are cases where people don't know the complexities of Ribbis and is likely the most complex area of Halacha in Choshen Mishpat for sure? Where would you give us? Can you think of a few cases where people may be nichshel in Ribbis and they're not aware of it?
Well, when it comes to air miles and points, people lend family members or friends air miles sometimes. Lending air miles, I'll give you 10,000 miles now when you want to fly, and you'll pay me back 10,000 miles when I want to fly some months later. So that's something that people do, and some people would think it's Ribbis. It's something that has to be discussed. And the reason for this is like this. Miles have a value in this market of selling miles, buying and selling miles. They have a value. Sometimes, I guess, they're 9 or 10 cents a mile. Sometimes they're 12, 13 cents a mile. It fluctuates. So if a person borrows miles when they are cheap and repays them when they are expensive, he is in effect giving back more than he borrowed. And anybody who learned even Mishnah says on Eshech, we know this is called Sa'or B'Sa'or. This is called lending a Sa'or B'Sa'or. Someone lends a Sa'or of chitin, one measurement of wheat, and he gets paid back sometime later the same measurement of wheat, the same amount. So this is also Midrabanon because of Ribbis. The reason it's only Midrabanon, not Midaraisa, is Nidin and Rishonim, either because something called Basa Meikara, that the person was never mischayev more than he borrowed, and when he borrowed it, it was worth the same amount, or because it's something called Kara L'Schav V'Rochik Mehefsid. It's not exactly clear, but it's definitely also Midrabanon. And to make this mutter, to make Sa'or B'Sa'or mutter, to make it mutter to borrow a cup of sugar from your neighbor, we need one of two things. We need either Yotza Shah, that's called Loven Al Shah Shebashuk, or Yeshloi. So Yotza Shah means that the price is kavua. There's a clear long-term price in the marketplace for this product, this commodity. So historically, the way it worked was that at the end of the summer, they used to bring in all the tvua, all the payers, everything into the granaries and barns. So we have Chag HaOsif, and then the price was set. We knew exactly how much supply of wheat there was for this year, and we used that to set the price, and that was a long-term price. If a person goes and buys in the field, buys the wheat back in the field, he's not sure if he's overpaying or underpaying because he doesn't know how much wheat there is in the market. But once it reaches the market, we have the price, the Shah is Kavua. So then it's easy to go and buy wheat for the price. Before you leave your house, you know how much money you're going to spend and how much wheat you're going to get. So therefore, Sa'or B'Sa'or is mutter because it's as though the loiva has the wheat at home. And which brings us to the other heta of Yeshloi. If the loiva has wheat in his barn when he borrows the wheat, so essentially he could take that wheat that he has and pay it back immediately, and he just pays it back a year later. It's as though the wheat in his barn already belongs to the malva at the time of the halva, and when he goes up in price, it's the malva's wheat that went up in price, and the loiva is not giving him any more than he borrowed, because the increase in price happened to the malva. And in this, there's a gewaldige kula. The Gemara says, "Machlokes we paskin yesh lo tippa malva olav kama tippin." Even if a person has only a tiny amount of wheat, he can borrow many, many pounds and tons of wheat on that. So yesh lo means just has to have a little bit. So a person is borrowing these miles. He borrows miles that he's going to use for hotel rooms or for flights, and these miles have a price. So a person might think this is Yotza Shah. There is a set price in the marketplace, how much you can buy these miles. So even if the loiva doesn't have any miles in his account, he can still borrow those miles and use them to buy those tickets and pay back later. The thing is, it's not so clear because this Yotza Shah miles, because it's a Hamisha business, it's not a business out there in the public. You can't Google and find out the price of Starwood miles on a given day. It depends on factors that may be above the market, maybe outside of the open market. You know, after holiday seasons or Yom Tov, when people have more miles on their cards because they spent more money. Miles could be cheaper. When it comes around the time to go to Uman for Rosh Hashanah, the price of miles goes up because there's more demand for miles. So these things are all not publicly available factors in changing the price. So we don't really know what exactly the price is in any given day, and you're trusting the broker, but you don't really know how much it is. So we can't call this Yotze Hashah. This isn't Yotze Hashah like it would be on currency or something like that. But we can Yeshloi. There's the head of Yeshloi. If the loiver has some miles in his account and he wants to supplement by borrowing more, or even if he doesn't, the Malda can give him 10 miles for free, and then he can lend him tens of thousands of miles on those 10 miles. And that, the Halacha and Simukuf Samach Bais in Royde says that should be mutter. That should be fine. But when discussing it in the Kollel, Tuning the Light, Pesach Levine, and Shmuel Finkel, they came up with a point that makes this a problem, and eventually this becomes the solution to the whole problem. And the problem is like this. Seeing as you said, the miles can't really be transferred like any product or commodity. So you can't just pass it over to the next person. So what you do is you find a way to allow the other person to use your miles. As far as I understand, there's one of two ways of doing it. Either the Baal credit card buys the ticket for the other person, and he's the one who redeems his miles for someone else's ticket or hotel room, or the buyer becomes temporarily an additional card holder on their account, so he always has a right to use those miles. And there's some level of trust over there that says that he'll only use a certain amount of miles, and that the seller of the miles won't suddenly change the password and stop him taking his miles, and then he gets his miles. He gets to use them. So in this case, when we see things looking like this, what ends up happening is the miles are not lent. The halva isn't chal until the ticket is bought, until the hotel room is reserved. Until that other person doesn't have his contract with the outside company, the miles aren't lent. The miles could always be chayzer. So when we call this a halva of miles, it's not really a halva of miles. It's the malva taking his hotel room, even though he doesn't know about the hotel room. He doesn't know what it is. But the hotel room belongs to him because it's his miles that are buying it. And the hotel room belongs to him. And he is giving the other person a hotel room. He's giving the other person a flight. Now, the loiver may be yeshloi miles. He may have miles. He doesn't have a hotel room. If the halva is in a hotel room and he's giving him back later a hotel room, it's not yeshloi. He doesn't have a hotel room available in his pocket. This would be similar to last Mishnah in Ezu Neshech, where we have a case of Chavosh imi begrid, v'ani achroy shemcha b'revia, that I will do a service for you. I will help you plow your field when the field is dry, and you will repay me by helping me plow the field after the rains. Now, everyone understands that plowing a field when it's rained already and it's muddy is going to be a harder job. And so, in this case, where I lend you a ticket on a flight that's in off-peak season, and you pay me back a ticket, means the miles for the ticket. When it's a peak season, nobody can say yeshloi. It's not the same thing. You're not giving back the same thing, and that's why it shouldn't help the fact that yeshloi is some miles. No, what comes out of this is a gewaltige heta. Because if the halva is taka, not chal, the halva is not chal on the miles. The halva is on the actual ticket you use. So the fluctuation in price over tickets, for example, peak season ticket costs $1,000, and off-peak it costs only $400. At the same time that the ticket goes up in price, the amount of miles you need for the ticket also goes up in price. So a ticket that's going to be 10,000 miles in an off-peak season could be 25,000, 30,000 miles in a peak season. So when you decide to borrow miles, you're not borrowing tickets, you're borrowing miles. You borrow 10,000 miles, and the miles have a different value at different times. But as we said, the miles you're borrowing is not really miles. What you're really borrowing is the flight, the hotel room. You're paying back the exact same value. You pay back a half a flight. If you borrow 10,000 miles at an off-peak time, and you pay back 10,000 miles at a peak time, you're paying back half a flight for a whole flight. You, I forget the word, the Lahatzmid in Ivrit, you depended the price of your halvah on some value. You attach it to the value of the actual flight. And therefore, you remove the ribbis, you remove the increase in price. Even though on the market, this black market for tickets, for miles, the price has fluctuated, but you're not giving him miles. You're giving him hotel room or a flight. And because of that, there would be no ribbis. So, in summary, if this case is true, that the cash price of a ticket and the miles price of a ticket are closely correlated, and when one goes up, the other one goes up proportionally, there should be no issue of ribbis in lending miles for miles.
Okay. Any other ribbis questions that you think people maybe frequently have an issue with that they're not aware of?
I don't know how much people out there know, but taking a mortgage on someone else's house to be similar to a credit card. Sometimes people buy their married children. They make a deal when the children get married. The two mechatanim together are going to buy a car for them, and one of them puts in his name, and the other one pays half the lease or the financing. So or they buy a house together, or they put the down payment on a house together, or whatever it is. But if the house is on someone else's name, because they're the ones who borrow the money, they're the ones who have the credit, and they're the ones who are on the hook for the house, then it's possible that there should be a problem of ribbis. There are different ways around it, but all the things that have to be done.
Well, why would this be different than the son who uses his father's credit card? That your point is it's a gift, so why wouldn't this be a gift too?
Right, they could be like that. But what happens if a couple get married, and part of the deal is that the two mechatanim together are going to buy a car for the couple. They don't have that much cash, so they finance the car. But the car is put on one of the mechatanim's names, and the other one pays that mechutan the money that he's going to give the financing company.
Oh boy!
So this a few years ago, someone called me and asked me how to make a star between the two of them. There shouldn't be ribbis. So there is a way of doing it, because if the car actually belongs to one of them, and the other one is paying, so the other one could be buying a piece of the car or giving the money to his child to buy a piece of the car, and he keeps on buying more and more and more of the car until the car's paid off.
Right.
Which is the heter of Moshe basically gives this heter for mortgages. Again, it's more complicated than that because you're also living in the house, or using the car, and that's also worth money. And if you're a loiva money, you can't use the other person's house. That's the Royde b'chatzer chinam, and therefore you would have to pay rent for that also. And you'd have to make the star. It's not perfectly simple. Someone who knows what he's doing would have to set up the star.
Rabbi Royde, do you have an email address that if somebody has a shiloh, they could contact you?
Yes.
Would you mind giving it out?
Okay, no problem. VAYAATEK MISHOM@gmail.com.
Well, Rabbi Royde, it was an honor having such a Talmid Chacham like you with us on the air. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Kulta. Let's go to the chosen winner of this week's riddle.
My name is Ken Shayowitz. As far as the question about, according to Reb Chaim, how do we say the last pasuk of the Megillah by Baal Peh? The way you said Reb Chaim, it sounds a lot like the Briskerov's piece about the Titan Shein Ma'akvin and Mahajim B'ner Chanukah, that Hidor mitzvah has to be with the mitzvah and it can't be after the mitzvah was fulfilled. It's possible that that's only about Hidor mitzvah, but not in respect to doing the mitzvah in a more lechatchila way or a better way. And we have some rayos for that. For example, we always blow the tekios, the miyushav before musaf, even though the real kiyum is during the Shemona Esrei. Even though you're still yotzei without the Shemona Esrei, you get the kiyum of tekios the meumad during Shemona Esrei by blowing again. We also, it's very common that people get up and say Kriyat Shema before davening, and let's say they want to get the Zman on Magen Avram, or they're afraid they're going to miss the Zman, and then they say the Shema again in the davening to fulfill Smichas Gula Tefillah and the Kriyat Shema HaSeder Brachos, and even the Shulchan Aruch recommends that you should say Shema in Siman Mem Vav. You should say Shema before davening if it's a possibility that you'll miss the Zman. And also the Shulchan Aruch says if you're counting Sefiras HaOmer during Ben HaShmashos, you should count with the shul, and you'll fulfill the mitzvah because it's a Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula. But if you remember later on, you should count again with to get the later Zman. So it's possible that when it comes to doing the mitzvah in a better way or a more l'chafkila way, you could go back and do the mitzvah again, and to get that extra kiyum, it could be only about a hiddur mitzvah, where the mitzvah has no chisaron at all, and it's only to make it in a more beautiful way. The hiddur mitzvah has to be with the mitzvah itself, like in the case of Reb Chaim and the Brisker Rav. It is possible, though, that the Mishnah Berurah doesn't agree, because he comments in Siman Vav that you shouldn't say Shema before davening unless you know that Minyan is going to miss the Zman. And he also says that you should make a Tanai when you're counting early, because I think he might be concerned, even in these cases, about doing the mitzvah, not being able to get that kiyum later on if you fulfill it too early.